Good evening, everyone. Glad to be here with you all tonight. So tonight, what we're going to call this is the prequel to Christmas. And the reason that I'm doing that is because there are some important events. Everything that happened prior to the book of Matthew was very important, but there were some events in specific that I wanted to touch bases on. And so I have my laptop here, I have my notes, I have my Bible, and I also have my phone with a few scriptures there so that way I can get exactly to where I'm trying to go to. But I'm going to try to do two different things here. And I'm going to try to condense it down into a short amount of time so that I don't bore you. But I want you to also understand where I'm trying to go with this. And so one of the things that we're going to talk about is the prophet Isaiah and how he offers us really of all of the prophecies that had been foretold about this oncoming servant or Messiah. He offers us the most complete picture of it. But before we get to him, we're gonna take a step back. So this is what I wrote. I wrote it down so that way I know I'm getting it right the first time that I'm telling you, and I don't have to come back and apologize, which I probably have to do anyway. But here we go. Now the prophet Isaiah actually steps in and receives a prophetic word from God, where a promise is being kept by God to King David. Now, if we look back at 1 Samuel, this is around the time where the Israelites were begging God to give them a king. They just had to have a king. Everybody around them had a king, so we need one too. And so Samuel, the prophet Samuel, spoke to God, telling them what they wanted. He was like, God, they're begging for a king. I don't know why. And God said, they're asking for the wrong reasons, but I'll give them one. So now enter Saul. Saul was chosen by God, this tall, handsome, and strong man who was chosen as their king. And he started out promising, but in the end, he ended up being a disaster. And we'll get to why he ended up being a disaster. But one issue that Saul had was that he could not defeat the Philistines. So God sent Samuel to Bethlehem to guide him to David. And David was this talented musician. I mean, could play a harp like nobody's business. I was trying to relate it to somebody today, but I don't know any harp players. And so let me find where I'm at just to make sure I'm getting it right. And so Samuel brought David to Saul's court, and he had him play the harp for him, and it was so beautiful that it soothed Saul. So anytime that anytime that King Saul was being tormented by evil spirits, and that's in quotes, because I believe it was sent by God, he had David come and play the harp for him because it soothed him, it calmed him down. He was overwhelmed, and so so at this point, David's finding favor in Saul's eye. And then there was the Goliath who was coming out just straight manhandling all of the Israelites. And this is where everybody, he comes out and was like, who's coming out here to challenge me? That's me paraphrasing. And that's when David, he's looking around, everybody's freezing up and they're scared, they're paralyzed with fear. And David steps up, gets his slingshot and hit him right there in the forehead, kills him. So of course, everybody's praising David, and then David goes on, he's fighting other Philistines, and he brings back to King Saul their foreskin. I believe it's 200 men is the number that I can remember off the top of my head. I don't know why. Well, anyways, and that's not the here nor there. I don't know if I could have been fighting in this army if they're gonna be taking off that, but that. Nevertheless, let's get back to it. And so, King Saul saw David, and he saw how David's army was growing and how he was getting more powerful by the minute, and everything that David did was just pleasing to God. David danced, God loved it. And so he got jealous. He was like, we got to slow this boy down. He's trying to come and take my kingdom. We can't have all that. And so he then starts to plot to kill David. And keep in mind, David at this point has done nothing wrong. David is just this humble being And we're going to talk about Hannah a little bit later, but so David then flees and he gets out to the wilderness. And now this is where scholars argue that this is where David wrote his stuff, his part in the book of Psalms when he was out in the wilderness. And there were times where Saul got close and David actually had multiple chances to kill Saul. But for whatever reason, his heart was so pure. He loved Saul. He loved people. David was a good guy that he didn't do it. And he showed him one time, I can't remember exactly what he did, but he proved to Saul that he had the opportunity to kill him right then and there. And he didn't take it because his heart was pure. But eventually Saul gets killed and David takes his rightful place as king. And he does a good job, and let me move this over a little bit. And he unites the 12 tribes for the first time. And he's doing well up into his own moral decay, his own fatal flaw. And it wasn't fatal for him. But Uriah the Hittite is a soldier in David's army. And when he's away, David sees Uriah's wife, Bathsheba, out on the balcony. And I'm guessing she was just that beautiful that he just had to have her. So he sleeps with her and she gets pregnant. He tries to trick Uriah into having relations with his wife so that way it can look like that it was his baby. Uriah doesn't do it for whatever reason. He ignores what David's orders are. And so David sets him up to have him assassinated in battle. And so God, he gets mad and he sends Nathan to tell David that he's displeased with the sin that he did. And of course, David confesses. He falls on his face and he humbles himself before God. He repents of his sin. And God, being the good God that he is, he forgives him. But he does tell David that as a result of this, that there is going to be a consequence. And that consequence takes place in David's family. It's all types of dysfunction. Listen, if you want something crazy to read that. I'm telling you, it's crazy. I'm not going to get into the details of that because this is not what I'm trying to do for bigger picture. But if we look back, I want you to remember, David was talking earlier in this book where he was talking about he felt bad that he was living in this house made of cedar, the tree, cedar wood, and God, the Ark of the Covenant was just kept in a tent. And if it wasn't kept in a tent, it was moved to a tabernacle. And if it wasn't kept in the tabernacle, it was back to the tent. And he felt bad. He told Nathan, we got to do something. I just feel bad. I'm in this big, beautiful palace, this big, beautiful house, and we haven't made a permanent house for God. And God, in so many words, tell him like, hey, listen, I appreciate it, but that won't be necessary because I can move at will wherever I want, whether it's in a tabernacle or it's a tent. But then he goes and tells David but from your offsprings, I will create a king. Now, this is before David messed up. And so this promise of a king is something that God did not only with David, but also Abraham. This is Abraham's line as well. And this Messiah or this king will come to earth as a man, but he will also be my own. And there's some things in the book of Isaiah that talks about it. But as all this is going on, David becomes an old man and his kingdom is falling apart after, he ran away from his son that was trying to kill him, and then his son is killed. And so David is mourning like he was when King Saul. And this is how David pretty much finishes his life. Just it's sad. But as we go on, And then we get into the book of Isaiah. So I'm switching notes here, y'all. As we get into the book of Isaiah, there was a lot of things Israel was doing, Israel type things where once again they're failing. They're worshiping all of these other gods. They see, you know, Assyria and all them who is the ruling kingdom during this time. And matter of fact, it is. Let me make sure I'm getting this right. Yeah, Assyria is top dog during this time, and this is during the life of Isaiah. And so Isaiah warned Israel of their failures. He showed and told Jerusalem of their rebellion against God. No matter how many rules God gave them and gave them several ways to get right, they still just could not do it. Isaiah prophesied to the nation and told them that they had turned a deaf ear to the Lord. They no longer served God in love. They offered meaningless sacrifices in God's temple at Jerusalem. They also committed injustices throughout the nation. Now, Isaiah is sort of like a prequel to the Christian story, as I told you earlier. We get bits and pieces leading up to Isaiah, but he does offer us the most complete picture that we've seen. And so, you know, I want to touch bases on it because I've been saying it. This word prophet, a lot of people believe that prophet is just somebody who can see the future, but that's not it exactly. A prophet is someone who has received a word or a vision directly from God. And this vision is to help us get through something that is coming our way. God sends warnings ahead. He's letting you know, hey, prepare for this. This is what's getting ready to happen. And, you know, you can either take... Now, luckily, due to what we're going to focus on tomorrow, God can now speak to us directly instead of us having to wait on somebody to get their act together to give us the correct information. But like I said, many prophets in the Bible were given specific visions of things to come. Now, if we look back at Deuteronomy 18:15, Moses tells the Israelites, "The Lord your God will raise up for you a prophet like me from among you, from your brothers," or you can say your fellow Israelites in some translations. And he says, you must listen to him. And so, you know, once again, they turn on their own. I don't know what that is about. And we see evidence of that still today. People that try to help us today, we still turn on them for whatever reason. You know, we got a mask ordinance, and it is designed to help us. I don't want to get into the politics of it, but we wipe that aside. People feel like it's a violation of their rights to try to help them. Anyways, I wanted to give a random thing here that I thought was very interesting, that the UN actually has at their headquarters in New York, a passage from the Bible, and is Isaiah chapter 2. It's on the stone, that stone thing that sits outside the UN, and it says this: the word that Isaiah, the son of Amos, saw concerning Judah and Jerusalem. Now it shall come to pass that the latter days, that the mountain of the Lord's house shall be established on top of the mountains, and shall be exalted above the hills, and all nations shall flow to it. Many people shall come and say, come and let us go up to the mountain of the Lord, to the house of God of Jacob. He will teach us his ways, and we shall walk in his path. For out of Zion shall go forth the law. And here's where we start to get into exactly what they have. And the word of the Lord from Jerusalem. He shall judge between nations and rebuke many people. They shall beat their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning hooks. Nation shall not lift up sword against nation, neither shall they learn war anymore. I think that's very interesting that that's what the UN chose. Um, and so that's just a random fact that you can take it if you want. But the boldest statement in Isaiah comes in chapter 12 or and verse 2. Behold, God is my salvation. I will trust and not be afraid. Now, if you know anything about the meaning of names, you would know that the meaning of Isaiah is God is salvation. And so I think that's a very powerful and beautiful statement. Um, and so, a lot of things that happened in Isaiah's prophecy did not actually happen in his lifetime. It happened hundreds of years before him. And I think it's just, it's powerful, but it's also, it scares me a little bit. If I'm being honest, it's crazy that someone could see that far because they spoke to to our God, to our Heavenly Father, who's described as when he came in through this cloud, his robe, his garment filled the tabernacle. That tells me that we serve a big and powerful God. My goodness. But I want to give you a couple of scriptures from the book of Isaiah to tell of this new coming Messiah. Whoever this person may be, we don't know. Maybe we'll find out tomorrow. Isaiah 7:14 says, therefore the Lord himself shall give you a sign. Behold, a virgin shall conceive and bear a son, and shall call his name Emmanuel. And we also know Emmanuel means God is with us. The people that walked in darkness have seen a great light. This is Isaiah 9:2. They that dwell in the land of the shadow of death, upon them hath the light shine. Isaiah 52:1. Awake, awake, put on thy strength, O Zion. Put on thy beautiful garments, O Jerusalem, the holy city. Isaiah 52:7. How beautiful upon the mountains are the feet of him that bringeth good tidings, that publisheth peace, that bringeth good tidings of good, that publisheth salvation. Oh, I said that weird. That saith unto Zion, thy God reigneth. And Isaiah 9:6. For unto us a child is born, unto us a son is given, and the government shall be upon his shoulders, and his name shall be called Wonderful, Counselor, the Mighty God, the Everlasting Father, the Prince of Peace. Y'all, this happened many, many years before Isaiah. He didn't get to see a lot of the things that he prophesied. Scholars are going back and forth today as to when they think that he actually died and when they believe that the exile of the children of Israel happened, because chapters 1 through 39 is really where they believe that he lived, and this was during the Assyrian rule, and that the rest of the book of Isaiah was composed by his disciples. And then a lot of when they're returning from the exile, this is during the years of Ezekiel. And so I just think that this is powerful and that it leads us into this beautiful period that we are going to celebrate tomorrow. And it's just wonderful. And I want you to think about this. We teach our kids about the red man, or the man in the red suit. But do we take the time to break down the story of this baby that was born to be the slain lamb, to atone for sins that you and I commit, for sins that you and I are going to commit tomorrow or the day after or in the future, some other distant future? He came to die on that behalf, on our behalf. It's cool we talk about Santa Claus. It's cool that we talk about the presents. But let us not forget the real meaning of Christmas. And I wanted to give you this prequel because I think that it is important to know how many people, hundreds, 1,000 years before Christ, oops, I slipped up, but before this oncoming Messiah, how they prophesied of him, and he came and he fulfilled the work so that you and I, so that we can live, so that we no longer have to sacrifice animals at an altar, so that we don't have to even try to remember what we did wrong, because let's be honest with it, we not even on purpose, we sin so much that we don't even know we're doing it at times. And he died so that we don't have to live in shame. The prophet Isaiah foreseen this. Matter of fact, I would like to believe that he is the originator. He is the original lyrics of Highway to Hell, because he saw the path that Jerusalem was on. And he said, you know what, if I can bring a few good people with me, everything's going to be all right. And he humbled himself before God. You know, Hannah told a beautiful story about how God loves the poor. He loves the humble, and how he does look in disappointment at those who are wealthy and prideful. If you really read the story of King Saul and King David, you would know that he brought this man that was nothing in King David. He probably would have just been walked by one of those people in the New York subway that was playing beautiful music, but nobody ever paid attention to who it was. That in so many ways is David just humbly playing his harp. And King Saul was this prideful man. I'm not going to give an example of anybody that I think it could be like today. That's not what I'm here to do. He did this. And both of these men had a great rise. And they both, when their arrogance and that pride took over, had that downward fall. But guess what? In the case of David, God let him live anyway. He let him finish his life because David came back to that humble place. We can do this, y'all. We can be better. And tomorrow we are going to talk about a place where we can get better. And it starts when we start to read the book of Matthew. And it goes on through all the other gospels. Love you all. I hope y'all have a wonderful evening. And I'm sorry for this video being this long, but I hope you enjoyed it. God bless you.